going to be a controversial one, and that's because there are two exactly opposite ways to look at this subject. However, I err on the side of always eating before you trip, and I always tend to make sure that I have had a decently sized meal before I ingest psychedelics for the day. But let me start this off by saying that I do not condone or encourage the consumption of any scheduled substance. This video exists purely for education and harm reduction reasons only. So the reason why I err on the side of you should always eat before you trip is because, well, you're not going to get hungry while you're tripping. And depending on how much of what psychedelic you took, that could mean that you're not going to eat for a large portion of the day, 10 or 12 hours. And if you didn't eat beforehand, once you're actually done tripping, you're going to be extremely hungry. So if you didn't start tripping until maybe mid-afternoon, now it's like midnight, you have nowhere to go to get food other than maybe Taco Bell, but that's not really satisfying enough. Then you're left with pretty much whatever's in your house. And if you're anything like me, there's usually not a lot of food in your house. So eat before you trip. Another good reason for eating before you start tripping is, well, nutrition. You're taking care of your mental through psychedelics, so you should also be taking care of your physical self through some substantially nutritious meal beforehand. Because your options are going to be extremely limited on psychedelics. Absolutely no animal product is going to be appetizing to you. Now, I do know that there are people who do eat animal products just fine on psychedelics. However, the vast majority of people, or at least the vast majority of people that I have asked, will say that animal products suck dick on psychedelics. And I can't really put into words what sucks about them, but they're just very unappetizing. So you're not going to want to eat anything that has anything to do with an animal, which now limits your options while you're tripping. So if you didn't eat beforehand and you get hungry while you're tripping and you don't have something on hand that's particularly appetizing to you, then you're not going to want to eat, and that's just going to be a bad experience. So if you filled yourself up beforehand, then you're not going to have that problem while you're tripping. Now, the second side of this argument is that you should be fasting before you trip. And there's a decent enough argument for this. I just, however, choose the opposite. But the argument for fasting before you trip is, well, one, it's going to make your trip hit harder. However, on this channel, we are not interested in getting the most high off psychedelics. We are interested in getting the most out of psychedelics. So that argument really doesn't apply to us because we're not trying to get fucked up on them. We're trying to use them to better ourselves. However, if you are the type of person that likes taking psychedelics just to see the pretty colors and experience a really intense emotion, which, I mean, granted is pretty much the entire experience, but we're also looking for a little bit of that mental insight too. At any rate, if you're taking psychedelics not so much for the mental insight and you're taking psychedelics more for the experience of taking psychedelics, like I did for many years, then fasting before you take them can be a good idea for you because, well, you're going to have an even more intense experience. Also, if you have ever been on an ayahuasca retreat or you intend on going on an ayahuasca retreat in the near future, you will probably be asked by the guides to actually fast beforehand. I think it's something like 12 to 24 hours. It's nothing insane, but it's a decent enough time. So once you actually arrive and you ingest the ayahuasca, when the ayahuasca inevitably makes you throw up, well, you're going to cause less of a mess because you're not going to be full of food. So there is that aspect to fasting before you trip as well, because some psychedelics can induce nausea and vomiting. So this way, once you do actually start throwing up, you won't have as much inside of you to come back out, so you'll make less of a mess. However, I am not the type of person that really gets sick when they take mushrooms. Granted, I've never been on an ayahuasca retreat, and I'm certain that when I do eventually take ayahuasca, I will get sick, but that's really more part of that whole experience than it is the mushroom experience. I know plenty of people that don't get sick on mushrooms, and I know plenty of people that do get sick on mushrooms. It's all an individual thing. So if you are someone that typically vomits whenever they take mushrooms, maybe try out fasting, because then this way you're going to cause less of a mess and hopefully vomit for less time. Granted, I am not a doctor and this is not an experience that I have, so I cannot speak very confidently about it, but it is something you might want to try out in the future. And as you can probably tell, I'm still struggling through a bit of a head cold right now, so this is all I have for you today. Please let me know in the comments which side of this hill you die on, and then do all of the fun YouTube things. You know what I'm asking about. It's nothing new. I will see you in the next one. Peace.